Last February, in a book group about the visionary minister and mystic Howard Thurman, member Luana Goodwin, many of you know Luana, told us about a park that she had visited once, a field. And before the land for this park was bought by the Maryland Park Service, this field is part of Fair Hill Natural Resource Management Area. Some of you may know it. It's at the corner of Maryland and Delaware and Pennsylvania. Belonged to William DuPont Jr. of DuPont Chemical Company. It was part of his large hunting estate that he amassed during the Depression. And there's a whole sermon I want to go in around that, but that's not for today. Before he bought the land is what I am finding inspiration from today. Maybe somewhere between the 1600s and the 1900s, this land was mostly populated by English colonists. And these people had built their homes there. Simple mills along the river, simple homesteads. And though a few ruins remain of these early buildings, for the most part, when you look out across the park, you only see plants and animals, fields and trees and river. And you see daffodils. During the months of March and April, you will find daffodils here and there in pockets throughout the park. And Luana told us that she was told by the person who gave her the tour that the daffodils were how you could tell that people used to live there. Daffodils spread where they're planted and they return year after year, but they're not native to the area and their bulbs are not picked up and carried by birds from one place to another. So when you see daffodils in our part of the world, it tells you that a human being lived there. When you see daffodils in our part of the world, it tells you that some human being who came before you knelt down around this time of year in the fall, when the nights were beginning to get chilly and the summer flowers were almost gone, and planted a knobbly brown bulb 6 inches deep in the soil, with the hope and the trust that after the winter came, the world would be greeted with the sunshiny face of a happy yellow daffodil in its place. Long after the people are gone, long after the houses crumble and the roads have grown over, you can tell where the people once dwelled by the daffodils rising in spring. And of course, we know that this is not the only way that you can tell where the people once dwelled. I read recently about a lake in France, and I'm looking at Anne Slater, who speaks French fluently. Apologies in advance, Anne and any other fluent French speakers. The Jérôme River, anybody know that one, or lake? It's in the Vosges mountain of eastern France. It's a popular summer bathing spot, I'm told. I'm told that it's occasionally a source of drinking water for the local town. And I read this article about this lake, that they had done a recent environmental study there and found high levels of the explosive TNT in the water, as well as iron and titanium and lead. The pollution comes, in large part, they believe, from unexploded munitions that had been dumped in the lake. Besides the massive destruction to humans and the environmental devastation wrought by bombs that have been dropped in war, often, I'm told, that when armies are forced to retreat, they will do things like dump all the extra bombs that have not yet been exploded into local lakes before they leave to keep the enemy from getting them. In this particular lake, between something like 1977 and 1994, they removed 120 tons of munitions, nearly 100,000 separate pieces of ammunition, shells, explosives. And they were from World War II, but they were from World War I as well, and some of them even from the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. They believe there's still something like 70 tons of munitions in this lake, at the bottom of the lake and in the middle, where it's very hard to remove because it's buried deep in the mud, despite the fact that it continues to pollute the lake and present a safety hazard to the people. They are still finding bombs and learning the devastating impact of those bombs from World War II across Europe 80 years after the war ended. More than 100 years after World War I ended. 150 years after the Franco-Prussian War ended. And this is not even getting into the impact of the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. In other words, my friends, you can tell where the people once dwelled by the bombs that continue to leach hazardous waste into the drinking water. You can tell where the people once dwelled by the so-called shadows of the people killed by the bombs burned into the sidewalks of the city of Hiroshima. You can tell where the people once dwelled by the flowers they planted or the bombs they dropped. How will we choose to be known? This upcoming Friday at sundown, Jews in this congregation and around the world will celebrate the holiest day in the Jewish faith, which is known as Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement. This is a day of fasting and prayer where people reflect on and confess their transgressions and their shortcomings and seek and then grant forgiveness to each other before seeking forgiveness from God and promising to do better in the coming year. It's a time of recovenanting with each other, of seeking to return to right relationship with each other, and recommitting to their aspirations to do right by each other and by their faith. And so each year on one of the Sundays that's closest to Yom Kippur, we too reaffirm our congregational covenant with each other, because what better time to do it than alongside our Jewish siblings and the Jewish people here in our faith. And we reflect on themes of atonement and forgiveness and right relationship together. And so whether or not you are Jewish, and I am not a Jewish person, I invite you to take this week as well to reflect on the relationships in your life, because it's always a good thing to do, and to look honestly at the places where you have caused harm, and to take responsibility for that harm, and then to seek forgiveness. This isn't a simple thing to do for any of us. It's not comfortable for any of us, I don't think. But the experience of intentionally working toward right relationship is an enormously powerful experience, and it's liberating. This year, as I've been reflecting on the themes of Yom Kippur as it approaches, I've been thinking not only of the individual ways I have been out of right relationship this year, although there are plenty of those, but also of these long patterns of harm from which it is hard to break free. Memoirist Shirley Abbott once wrote, "We all grow up with the weight of history on us. Our ancestors dwell in the attics of their brains as they do in the spiraling chains of knowledge hidden in every cell of our bodies." Family systems theorists speak of multi-generational transmission processes. Any family systems people? I know there's like a good number. Yeah, there's like a bunch of therapists. They're like, yeah, therapists and chaplains. In other words, what this means is it's the ways of our and patterns of our behavior that we've learned from our families of origin, and sometimes many generations back. Some of these are wonderful, right? A grandparent who never had much but gladly gave everything she had can instill a deep ingrained generosity from us at a young age. I watched my 1-year-old baby take her baby bottle and try to feed our cat. You can learn, you can learn generosity at a very young age. And some of the ways that we receive this are devastating. 12-step programs are full of people trying to break generations-long cycles of addiction, right? Addiction and codependence that they inherited from parents who inherited that cycle from their parents who inherited it from their parents. How many of you here can think of a positive value or behavior that's deeply part of who you are that came from the family that raised you? Raise your hand. Something good you received from your family. Yeah, people on Zoom too. Yeah. And what about something negative you receive from your family? We all have both, right? It's just part of being human. When multi-generational transmission processes combine with the bigger systems of privilege and oppression in our world, systems of colonialism and environmental devastation, we find ourselves caught in the web of the worldwide problems that we see every day, like violence and abuse, war and slash and burn development, slavery, genocide, racism, xenophobia, and more. Humankind is stuck repeating these massive patterns of oppressions over and over again, whether we are the receivers of a privilege from those oppressions, or our thriving and humanity are constricted by those oppressions. And often, many of us as individuals feel powerless to create change. Those smaller, more personal challenges, sometimes the ones we inherited maybe from many generations back, can occupy so much of our emotional and psychological energy, and we can feel so small in a massive world that it can sometimes feel like nothing will ever change, either in our life or in the world. That progress is at best 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and at worst 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's nearly impossible to lead a justice movement when you're in the deepest throes of addiction recovery, right? It's nearly impossible to achieve academically at a high level when the poverty of your neighborhood means you showed up at school with no breakfast and were woken by gunshots in the night, and when you have had to bury a classmate or a family member killed in gang violence and you wonder if you are next. There's a reason why the U.S. government agencies who were opposed to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work in the civil rights movement tried to stop him by playing off of his deep depression, tried to encourage him to take his own life before they tried to assassinate him. Atoning for the ways that we have not been the best friend or sibling in this past year is one thing, but how do we seek forgiveness for the bombs that are made and paid for by our tax dollars that are being dropped on families huddling in tents halfway around the world? I know I'm taking you all to a heavy place, and those of you who know me know that I don't have a fast-acting magic prescription that can solve these deepest problems that we faced as a human people. What I know is that we do have some of the tools for the work. I saw a meme on Instagram recently that said something like, "Every time I whisper, 'What in the actual F-bomb?' under my breath, rather than yelling it at my children, I silently consider it a victory for gentle parenting." And I should read more about parenting. I don't actually know a ton about gentle parenting, although I'm pretty sure I'm trying to practice it, because gentle parenting is a current parenting trend that I looked up in order to write this sermon. That I imagine many of the parents here, fellow parents of young children, lean into, because the goal is to raise confident, independent, and happy children through empathy, respect, and understanding, and setting healthy boundaries. That sounds good, right? What in the actual? We whisper it rather than yell, and that is a victory for the next generation of our children. Just one of the recent ways parents today are trying to learn from and improve upon the parenting that came before, just as the parents that came before tried to learn from and improve on the parents that came before them, and so on and so forth to the beginning of time. Similarly, people who successfully stay in recovery from an addiction that has plagued generations of their family do incredible healing work, both in their own lives and in the lives of children or anyone else for whom they have a caretaking role in the rest of their life. Healing doesn't just occur in the present, writes Resmaa Menakem in My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. Healing doesn't just occur in the present. When you heal a soul wound, you heal the people who came before you. When you heal a soul wound, you heal the people who came before you. Because we in Unitarian Universalism believe that people are more good than otherwise, more kind than otherwise, that people are mostly doing the best they can, that humankind is deeply flawed, and yet every time a new baby is born in this world, their parents and their grandparents and their aunties and uncles and hunkles and nibblings and all the adults in their religious communities join together and want what is best for that baby, right? Each of us want that new life to be a little bit easier than it was for us. Each of us want to give every bright new being a happier and a healthy path forward than what we were given. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, the saying goes. Even those ancestors who did us wrong. Though that in no way excuses their behavior, they too were fighting a battle that we still know nothing about. And some say it's too hard to forgive, but as Laura sang to us this morning, I join her in saying it's too hard not to forgive, because forgiveness sometimes releases us from holding on to a harm that we reinscribe over and over again, more even than it releases those we forgive. We cannot miraculously heal all of the generational trauma we were dealt. We cannot immediately dismantle all of the systems of oppression that have been woven into our laws and our economic system and our educational system and tightened around the inner reaches of our hearts. But we can do some of it. We can, because we are a people who have power to change. And for every wrong for which we atone and then do not repeat afterwards, and for every way that we hold on to our own recovery from self-harm, and for every time we whisper something under our breath rather than yelling it at our children, because our children will someday hear our parental voice as their internal voice. Every time we do this, we do some of that healing. And when we heal ourselves, we open up emotional space to work to heal one another. And when we heal a soul wound, we heal some of the people that came before us. Each one teach one, it is said that slaves spoke to each other as they learned to read in secret. Author Toni Morrison reminds her students that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then it is your job to empower somebody else. Our reading this morning from Maxine Hong Kingston said that when we are born, we have curses and gifts from our parents and our ancestors that come from way back. And generation after generation, we work on them and we work with them. They are curses because there are terrible problems and hardships. And the most difficult questions of humanity, such as why war and what is love? But they are also gifts because we have the opportunity to come up with the most beautiful answers. Long after the earlier people are gone, long after one's generation's houses crumble and the roads have grown over, you can still tell where the people once dwelled. You can tell in the bombshells found in the rubble of those homes, and in the toxins in their water supply, and in the shadows burned into the pavement. Or you can tell by the daffodils turning their sunshiny faces to the sky each spring. How will we choose to be known? My friends, I pray that we may be the people who come up with those beautiful answers. That we may be the people sowing seeds of gladness. So may we go forth and plant our daffodils. Amen, and blessed be.
Hi, I'm Reverend Abby Tennis, and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Reverend Alexandre da Silva Soto, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs.
And we are the ministers of the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where it is our mission to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world. We're so glad you watched this video, and we hope that its message connects with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for Zoom services Sunday morning at 11 a.m. or come in person at 2125 Chestnut Street, Center City, Philadelphia.
Whether you join in person or online, in these services you'll hear messages like you just heard. You'll get a chance to sing together, pray together, and even greet one another in coffee hour afterwards, whether you're brand new or a longtime member.
You can always find a Zoom link to our services and more about what to expect on Sunday mornings on our website, philauu.org, philauu.org. The link is below.
If you are connecting with this message and feel moved to give to the mission of this congregation, we invite you to click on the link below again and follow the prompts to give, or send a text message to 215-709-5095, and again, follow the prompts.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, please share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.
See you soon.